Hello, and welcome to The Mindful Leader, the importance of social emotional development and leadership. My name is Dr. Lynne, and I am the Dean of Graduate and Professional Studies at Lasell University in Newton, Massachusetts, United States of America. I'm pleased to be presenting to you today on behalf of TERA, Teaching and Education Research Association. I have been affiliated with TERA for many years as a presenter and a keynote speaker. My goal for this presentation is to give you all the background and foundation for the importance of social emotional development for quality leaders. I will concentrate on the important traits of social emotional development in leaders, in teachers, and in students. Once we recognize as leaders what we need to have in terms of social emotional traits, we can then look for these and help develop in our teachers as we go about our observation, supervision, and evaluation, and further have these transfer into lessons, activities that will promote these same social emotional traits for all of our students. So, after this introduction, I'd like you to take a minute to think about what should the leadership focus be in terms of the mindful leader. What should quality leaders be looking for in themselves and in classroom settings? What social emotional traits do you think should be present in classroom settings as you do your walkthroughs, do your observations, and do your formal evaluations? I'd like you to take a minute before you go on to the next slide and write down some of these social emotional qualities that you think are critical to be present for you as a quality and collaborative leader, as well as what kinds of behaviors you're going to be looking for that demonstrate quality social emotional development and social emotional learning for both teachers and students in every classroom setting. Before we move on to compare your list of what you have written down about quality social emotional traits that quality leaders, quality teachers, and our students, all our students need to have, let's pause for a second and take a look at what the research says about the benefits of social emotional learning and social emotional development. If we concentrate on developing our social emotional skills as quality leaders, quality teachers, and quality students, research has shown that this improves students' social emotional skills, attitudes, relationships, academic performance, perceptions of classroom and school climate. This means that overall, students are approaching learning and the classroom environment in a very positive way. And isn't that what research supports? Quality learning and positive learning outcomes and mastery of skill sets for students? I think so. Further, the research demonstrates that developing social emotional skills and social emotional learning, there is a decline in students' anxiety, behavior problems, and substance abuse. Having said that, that points back to my previous comment that says things should be positive in classroom settings, positive in relationships between leaders and teachers and students. The less anxiety, the less behavior problems, the less substance abuse, the more positive a classroom setting is, the more positive a relationship is between a leader and all the teachers, and a collaborative team approach to distributive leadership. The goal here, and research supports, is to have as little negative behaviors, attitudes in a classroom setting so students can be open and motivated and engaged, and most importantly, self-motivated and self-engaged to learn and learn in a positive way. Next, research supports long-term improvement in student skills, attitudes, pro-social behavior, and academic performance. Again, these points from research and supported by research also connect to my prior comments. The more positive everyone is in a learning environment, in a school environment, in a district environment, the more positive the outcomes will be for all of our students. And lastly, it's a wise financial investment, cost benefit in terms of long-term results for our students. If we invest in this way in our students, there will be less negative long-term outcomes for them. So let's continue to think about your list. Take another moment, revisit your list, and given these research-based principles, write down more, edit, tweak, whatever you would like to do with your list about social emotional traits and social emotional learning for a wonderful district, school, classroom relationship in terms of social emotional development. So now, as we think about the research that supports social emotional development and social emotional learning, we can't help but go to the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, which is internationally known for this work and their research. It is the basis for all we should be doing with our students around social emotional development. In the next few slides, we will be talking about the 5 broad interrelated areas for social emotional development. And we'll be stopping and thinking about how these areas, each individually and interrelated, affect the work we do as quality leaders, for our quality teachers, and so our students will have the benefit of our social emotional learning and social emotional development and the positivity that we can bring to every classroom setting, every classroom behavior, every classroom learning environment, whether positive or negative, and how our response as leaders and teachers should be to promote the best in our students always. As we continue to look at the qualities of leadership as it relates to being a mindful leader, let us continue with the CASEL 5. These are the 5 broad interrelated areas of competence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. As quality leaders and mindful leaders, we want to have these skills in our toolbox at all times. And as we want to be, quote, mindful of these, we want to help develop these skills with our teachers and help our teachers develop these skills with our students. When we have developed these 5 broad interrelated skills, all of us, we will be able to face anything that comes into our path in a positive way and be able to embrace challenges and turn them into positives. As you can see by the graphic on this slide, it's a wheel. Social and emotional learning and development at its core, and the 5 interrelated areas of competence that we will be talking about in this presentation in the next phase. But please notice in this wheel, as the 5 interrelated areas of competence move out, they should be moving out into classrooms, schools, families, and caregivers and communities. And they should be aligned with social emotional learning instruction and classroom climate, school-wide culture, practices, and policies, or organization-wide culture, practice, and policies, authentic partnerships, and aligned with all learning outcomes or goals and objectives of an organization. Please take a look at your list once again. Pause. Make another list with each column titled one of these 5 interrelated areas. Again, we will be drawing parallels with what you started, with what you've learned thus far, and how they will begin to connect very clearly to these 5 interrelated areas. Let's continue. Now that you've had the opportunity to take a look at your original list when we began this work about what was meaningful for a mindful and quality leader with reference to social emotional development and social emotional leadership, and you've refined that list as we've done our work together, and now you have your new columns with the 5 interrelated areas. Let us begin with delving into these 5 interrelated areas independently. Before we do, I invite you to take a look at the castle wheel again. We will be concentrating on that central wheel, social and emotional learning and development as it relates to mindful and quality leaders. And the second wheel, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. The first one we will delve into is self-awareness. This is one's ability. That means all of us. Their ability to understand our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own values, and how these emotions, thoughts, and values influence behavior across anything we do, across any situation we come, across any context. These capacities recognize our strengths and our limitations. And let me emphasize, we have to always, as quality mindful leaders, vis-a-vis social emotional development, have to continually revisit our limitations so that we end up with a well-grounded sense of confidence and purpose. Some examples of how this part of the 5 integrated areas manifest themselves in practice are integrating our personal and social identities. How do we do that? How do we know that what we have as qualities and what we have as limitations identify us as people in our social as well as our professional context? Then we have to identify our personal, cultural, and linguistic assets. What do we have that can contribute to what we do as quality, mindful leaders in our personal lives, in our cultural lives, in our linguistic lives? This is important because as we interact with a variety of demographics, personally and professionally, teachers with leaders, teachers with students, leaders with teachers, any professional relationship we have, where are our assets playing the best role? Thirdly, we have to be able to identify, name, and put a point on what behaviors target our own emotions. This perhaps is probably one of the most difficult things to do. Identifying and really stating that it's true. And along with this comes demonstrating honesty and integrity with reference to these emotions, as well as with reference to everything that we do, decisions that we make, interactions that we have, that they are always honest and always ethical and always have integrity. Further, as you can see, all of these scaffold on one another. We have to link our feelings, our values, and our thoughts with our emotions and our behaviors. Take a minute and pause now and look at the list that you have from the beginning that's been tweaked and add to the column of self-awareness where you feel that these links happen. Name your emotions. Name the behaviors that show these emotions. Write down how your feelings, your values, and your thoughts can be honest and have integrity. And link this to practice with an example in behavior. Hey Siri, what does self-efficacy mean?
Here's what I found from appa.org. Self-efficacy is confidence in the ability to control one's motivation, behavior, performance, and social environment.
And move on to examining our prejudices, and our biases. This is important because you now have a list of what you think manifests itself in a 50,000-foot view of social emotional development, social emotional leadership, and a quality leader. But you also have drilled down and begun to drill down for yourself personally about what it looks like in practice in terms of your own emotions, your own honesty, your own intelligence, your own integrity, your own personal, cultural, and linguistic assets, and how this leads back to your personal and social identity. So in order to be very frank and truthful with ourselves, we have to examine our prejudices and biases. How confident are we in the ability to control our motivation, our emotions, our behaviors, our performance, and react in a social environment? This is social and self-efficacy. Being able to have confidence in the ability to control our own motivation, behavior, performance, and social emotional environment. How do the behaviors that you've written down contribute to accomplishing this goal? Important question. Take a minute to note that. Thank you for pausing the video when I asked you to take a minute to do something, because the application to practice of this work that we're doing is extremely important. How did you do? What do you need to work on? Make notes as to where you see you still have challenges. You might have implicit or explicit prejudices and biases that you didn't even know you had, because now we're starting to look internally at ourselves in terms of leadership, mindfulness, social emotional development, and social emotional learning. The next step in this process of self-awareness is always having a growth mindset. This harkens back to what I just discussed. Always, always, always looking at our prejudices and our biases. Those don't go away. They might become implicit, but we have to make them explicit and work on them so that we can get better and we can grow and we can be better for the people we interact with as leaders with teachers, helping teachers with students. And lastly, in terms of self-awareness as part of this wheel, think about developing interests and a sense of purpose. Not always just in general, and not just with regard to your personal life, but with regard to interests and a sense of purpose with what your goals for being a quality leader are in terms of social emotional development of yourself, your teachers, and students. This is the purpose of developing self-awareness so it can reach out to classrooms, other areas, schools, other areas of an organization, families and caregivers, colleagues, and communities. As we move on to the second of the 5 interrelated areas of competencies for social emotional development and social emotional learning for mindful leaders, let's start thinking about self-management. Self-management on the castle wheel speaks to the abilities of us to manage our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations and to achieve our goals and aspirations. This includes, as the slide states, delaying gratification, managing stress in positive ways, feeling motivation, and agency to accomplish personal and collective goals, and I would add to that professional goals. How does this manifest itself in our work and as being mindful leaders, mindful people in our personal lives, and everything that we do? Let's take a look. Self-management is our ability to keep our emotions in check, both our positive emotions and our emotions that challenge us. That can be difficult. As we've previously discussed, we have to identify those emotions first and really be able to recognize when they're manifesting themselves in our work and in our relationships. We can't manage them if we don't identify them. So when we pause next, I would ask you to be sure to look at your list and make sure that you've identified some emotions that are positive in your life, both personal and professional, and that challenge you. Because this is critical for this work on an ongoing basis. Once we've identified our emotions and are able to really put our finger on it, we have to be able to identify and use stress management strategies. And these really point to a challenge for many of us. There's stress in everyday life. There's stress in being effective leaders and mindful leaders. There's stress in any professional work that we do. But in order to be able to use self-management stress strategies, we need to be able to identify them and label them as challenges. Further, we need to be able to show that we can actually apply self-discipline and self-motivation. Self-discipline first is to be able to do what I just discussed. Where are the stress points? Where are the triggers? How do we manage them? What are the concrete steps that we use self-talk, lists, journal writing, whatever works for us, to be able to practice the self-management strategies and therefore translates into self-discipline. Once that happens, the good news is that we can say now, we can translate all of that into a positive of self-motivation. Self-motivation to continue on a cyclical basis to set personal and collective and professional goals. And I say cyclical because these personal, professional, and collective goals change, are ongoing, are evaluated, are assessed for effectiveness, and are modified and changed and adjusted if necessary. So once again, at this time, I ask you to pause, turn off this presentation for at least 5 minutes. Set your timers on your phone if you need to, do whatever. And I want you to look at what you've identified on your lists as emotions, as strategies for good, mindful, quality leaders with social emotional development and social emotional learning in mind, as far back as the beginning of this presentation. I want you to look at how they evolved and how they aligned and how you might have drawn arrows to connect to the 5 interrelated areas of competency before we started to discuss them. Now we're into our second area, and I'd like you to take these 5 minutes and look at what you've written and brainstorm 2 to 3 goals, keeping in mind mindful leadership and social emotional development that you might newly draft understanding these new competencies. Okay, so we're back. Take a look at those goals as we move forward because we're going to be revisiting those throughout the rest of the presentation. Let us look at planning and organizational skills so that we can accomplish these goals that you've set. Think about, as I'm talking, how you plan best. We all learn differently, we all lead differently, we all interact differently. And one way is not any better than another, as long as we reach our outcomes and our desired goals, and we can actually show evidence that we've done so. So how do you plan? Do you write lists while collaborating with others? Do you just think in your mind? Steps 1, 2, 3, 4? Do you make Post-its and put them down on your desk, and as you complete something, throw them away? These strategies are different for all of us, as I've said, but it's a way to organize ourselves. And we have to have organization to reach those goals that you just wrote down and the many more that you will do as you grow in this way. And you will have to really understand yourself and how you plan and organize. Vis-a-vis being a mindful leader with social emotional development in mind. This isn't always easy. It's difficult work. And it's easy to say, okay, I have my 2 to 3 goals, being a mindful leader, social emotional development in mind, bringing my teachers together, bringing my colleagues together, setting collective and personal goals, all of what we've talked about. It's easy to say it. It takes courage and perseverance and willpower to do it. I'm going to ask you to pause once more. And underneath those goals, I would like you to write with deep reflection what might challenge you to take the courage, perseverance, and willpower to accomplish the goals that you've set, at least for this presentation and going forward to help you jumpstart this work. Thank you for taking the time to do that, because recognizing the challenges to reaching the outcomes of the goals that you set are the only ways that you will be able to actually accomplish them with evidence that you've done so. Once you've taken the courage and the initiative, the perseverance and the willpower to do these steps, accept the difficult work, and actually outline the steps needed to reach the outcomes, you are beginning to demonstrate personal, professional, and collective agency. That is the power that we have over our own lives to commit to developing and grow. It's the power, not as in power over strength, but determination and power and resiliency to embrace our emotions, both the positive and the challenges, in terms of social emotional development as mindful leaders, and embracing this power that we have to commit to the cyclical growth mindset of doing this difficult work. Moving on to the third of the 5 interrelated areas of competence for social emotional development for mindful leaders. We've talked about self-awareness and self-management, and now we move on to social awareness. Social awareness, for the purposes of being mindful people, no matter what we do, is our ability to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. As you can see, we are now expanding even the inner wheel to include others beyond ourselves. It includes our capacity to feel compassion for others, a broader historical and social perspective, social norms for behavior in different settings, and recognizing family, school, and community resources and supports, no matter what type of profession we're in, but especially for leaders in education. What does this mean in practice? It means we take everything we learned from our self-awareness development, our self-management development, our goal setting, our steps we've identified to reach those goals, the challenges we face, being able to identify our emotions, both positive and the challenges, and being able to work on them to make them as positive as possible. By doing so, we have the ability, or we begin to have the ability, to take on others' perspectives and to actually embrace them and hear them, and to recognize the strengths in others, not only their professional strengths, personal strengths, but the strengths in their perspectives. Doesn't mean we always have to agree, but it means that we have to be able to recognize them and validate them. And from this comes being able to show empathy and compassion for their perspectives, for their leadership traits, for their emotions, for everything they have that we've identified about ourselves. We begin to then show concern and feelings for others. And we can express gratitude based on what we see in ourselves and what we see in others. Now, this pause to look back at your professional development sheet and your notes is really important. It's important now to start a second page, a page where you will start relating what you've identified in yourselves, all those traits that you aligned with the research from Castle, the goals that you identified, the steps and strategies that you identified that you would take to reach certain outcomes, to be a mindful leader with social emotional development in mind, to be a mindful leader to help teachers or others in your organization, to also be mindful in their own social emotional development, and if in education, to translate to children. So in this pause, however, the second sheet will now have notes around how what you're doing, the work you've set for yourself, can apply to broadening your perspective to the ripple effect of other people in your personal and professional lives. So what I would like you to do on this second sheet, similar to the way we began the first sheet, is to jot down just ways that you think you might be able to take others' perspectives, recognize their strength, show empathy and compassion and concern for their feelings, and most importantly, express gratitude for others as well as yourself. Please take some time to pause this presentation and do some thoughtful thinking about how you can accomplish this task. Thank you for taking the time to be so thoughtful about this process. This is difficult work, important work, but makes us better people, makes us better professionals, makes us better leaders. Let's continue with the more important information about social awareness in this wheel of being a mindful leader. Once you've gotten to a point where you can express gratitude for others and in others, it allows us the strength and the skill set to identify different social norms, including unjust ones. This is where we really need to look carefully. Once we have been able to look outward, after identifying the strengths and challenges within us and being self-aware, we now can look outside of us and be able to identify what's going on around us in our personal, professional, and in the world at large. This is important because we have to be able to validate and celebrate social norms that are diverse from our own, as well as identify diverse, unjust norms and be able to name them. And this isn't a political statement. This isn't a political affiliation. This is general unjust norms. You might be thinking, what is an example of that? I'm going to ask you to think about that. Think carefully what a general unjust norm is. This is an example I will give you that is really very generally unjust. Killing for the sake of killing. Bullying for the sake of bullying. Harassing for the sake of harassing. I'm not identifying any particular social group, ethnic group, demographic group when I give you those examples, but they are unjust norms. And we have to be able to see that. And by going through the process that we're going through today, you will be able to see, identify, and model appropriate behaviors that show the opposite of the unjust ones. And in that, you'll be able to recognize the demands that this takes, depending on a situation, but the opportunity that it presents to you as a leader, a mindful, good leader with all this social emotional development research and background and work that you've done with yourself an opportunity to be able to model just behaviors, to be able to name the unjust ones in yourself and in your mind, and to be able to model something different with your words and your actions and your deeds. This brings you to understanding how all of this can influence organizations and systems of behavior. Let's keep in mind the culture of any organization influences all this work, influences our work as mindful leaders, influences our work as becoming better mindful leaders and understanding social emotional development and social emotional learning. If we are in a culture where there are social norms that are positive, we model and we mirror those. But if we're in a culture that also has some unjust norms, we model the just ones. And that's the way this work continues to make a positive impact on everyone involved. As we continue along discussing the 5 interrelated competencies for social emotional development and social emotional learning, we think about and continue to reflect upon what it means for these skill sets to be part of mindful and quality leaders. The 4th interrelated competency is relationship skills. This is in our wheel and comes out very importantly. Relationship skills in any mindful leader and quality leader maintain healthy and supportive relationships, continue to try to establish them on an ongoing basis as the teams change, as the organizations change, as schools change, districts change in education. And further, relationship skills that effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. This could not be more important. Navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. And I would go on to say, even embrace them. These relationship skills for a quality mindful leader include the capacity to communicate clearly, listen actively, cooperate and work collaboratively, always try to problem solve in a collaborative way, negotiating, building consensus if possible, and particularly paying attention to differing social and cultural demands and the opportunities that the differing demands provide for us. That points back to working with diverse individual groups and diverse individuals. We need to embrace, as mindful leaders in any organization, what the positives can bring from this diversity and the opportunities to provide leadership, seek help, and offer help when needed. Please remember, as mindful and quality leaders that we may be, there is always room for us to build our skill sets to become better, ever evolving mindful leaders. How does this translate? As I said, communicate effectively, always, always, always trying to build positive relationships and embracing our teams, our colleagues as team members, even though we might be the leader. We must demonstrate, both in our words and in our actions, that we have a cultural competency. This means, as I said previously, embracing diversity in our cultures, in our organizations. And not just embracing them in words, but embracing them in our behaviors and what we do. What does that mean? Integration of the cultural diversity in the culture. Not one-offs, a day of reflection. That's not embracing cultural diversity. It becomes part of the fabric of our organization, and it is critical that that becomes part of our fabric. We need to be, quote, mindful of how we are doing this, or in fact, if we're not doing it, and plan to slowly build it into the fabric of our culture. As I said, teamwork and collaborative problem solving, where people are free to take risks, help develop these positive relationship skills, and people begin to trust, as I've spoke about earlier in this presentation. This dovetails to constructive resolutions of problems and conflicts that arise on a daily basis in any organization, and resisting the social pressure to just jump to problem solving without the necessary foundation that builds collaboration to problem solving. We must model, showing leadership in groups and teams, but not leadership in a top-down way. Leadership in an equal partnership with all members, as well as open-mindedness that encourages differing opinions. Again, these behaviors that we model build these positive relational skills and relationship skills that make us good, mindful leaders. Importantly, we need to model that we seek help when needed. We may be the leader, but we don't know everything. This is the growth mindset that we want for ourselves as mindful leaders in any organization, education, schools, communities, in any professional situation. We want to model that we surround ourselves with people that are going to help us get to these places that I've discussed. And we offer this support in turn to others who are trying to do this as well. And in all of this, built into the culture, the positive culture that we try as leaders to build and promote and continue, we must stand up for the rights of everyone. This is part of embracing diversity, but it's not just embracing diversity. It's everyone, all of the, quote, others. So this fourth interrelated competency for becoming a mindful leader is critical. It dovetails the three of self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness, and is very important in the process of building trust. And in building trust, we can solve problems, we can attain goals, and we can collectively attain anything we need to attain. And now this brings us to the fifth interrelated area of competency for social emotional development, social emotional learning for mindful leaders in any organization. This is actually the culmination of all the work from the four previous areas of competency: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship skills. The fifth area is responsible decision-making. Responsible decision-making is one of the most important things a quality mindful leader engages in on a regular basis. We make multiple decisions on a daily basis, even minute by minute sometimes. And responsible decision-making skills in a mindful way are critical for quality leaders. So according to the research and the Castle Wheel, for quality organizations, responsible decision-making is the ability for leaders and anyone else in the organization to make caring and constructive choices about their own personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. It further is the ability to make constructive choices about collective social interactions across diverse situations. As leaders, we have to make personal, constructive decisions, but we also have to consider constructive collective decisions. These consider the capacity to take into consideration ethical standards and safety concerns, evaluating the benefits and consequences of our actions for our personal and professional decisions, for not only our own social well-being, but the well-being of the collective whole of the organization in which we lead. That's important to underscore, the collective well-being of the organization in which we are leaders. Some behavioral and social emotional goals that we should have around responsible decision-making are skills that demonstrate curiosity and open-mindedness. We talked about this in different ways in the 4 previous interrelated competencies. The building of a trust environment, a risk-free environment, welcoming diverse cultures and opinions, all building to trust. We have to learn the skills to make reasoned judgment, analyzing information, data, and facts, not based on our gut feelings. Sometimes we go with intuition, but we have to find the facts and the data that support it. Otherwise, it can be interpreted as a top-down decision-making process, and we don't want that. We have to find solutions after we identified issues that need to be addressed, personally as leaders, for personal colleagues, as well as for the social collective issues that might face us as mindful leaders. And importantly, we have to be anticipating and evaluating the consequences of our decisions, our actions around these decisions. Will the consequences be positive? Will it backfire? This is the reason why it's so important to evaluate the data before making responsible decisions. We have to recognize how our critical thinking, our high-level evaluation, our application of skills that we have as mindful leaders to practice are helpful both in and outside of school and in and outside of organizations in which we are leaders. We have to reflect on our role to promote personal, family, and community well-being. This is where the Castle Wheel says that we are leaders in education or any other field. Do not do our work in isolation to our own particular circumstances. But as I have said previously, it has a ripple effect all the way out to communities. For the purposes of education, it ripples out to classrooms, to schools, to districts, to families and caregivers, and then to the community. But that's not unique to just educational situations. Please keep that in mind. Again, evaluating our personal, interpersonal, intrapersonal, community, and institutional impacts. We have to be doing that at all times as we try to practice responsible decision-making on a minute-by-minute, day-by-day, week-by-week, short-term and long-term basis. And the question that we have to ask ourselves all along the way, what behaviors of children, if we're in education, and adults do we have to consistently be cognizant of in any relationship, classroom setting, professional relationships, and personal relationships in order to assure that as quality, mindful leaders, that we are practicing responsible decision making? Please reflect carefully on that question.